welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited for this topic, forecasting software budgets for 2025. I'm Katie and I'm from the customer success team here at Cledara. And we're really excited to have you here to dive into what is an important topic for any growing company, right? Planning and forecasting your spend, and in particular your software spend. I think everyone here kind of knows that budgeting for software can be challenging. You've got new tools popping up every year. You've got a multitude of different plan structures and billing, and it's crucial to balance what you need now with what your company will need to scale in the future. And so today we want to be really practical and focus on some real tips and strategies to help you nail your software budget for the upcoming year and make sure you're successful for 2025. And here to share her experience is our special guest, Sophie Conaghan. Hi, Sophie. How are you today?
Hello. Thanks, Katie. Nice to be here. I'm good, thanks.
Fantastic. Well, just want to give everyone a bit of an intro to Sophie. So as I said, she's going to bring lots of experience because she's been helping startups and founders understand the financial side of their business. She runs Finance for Founders workshops. But Sophie started out as a chartered accountant before transitioning into tech about 11 years ago now. And since then, worked with founders, leadership teams. She's the finance lead at CharlieHR, focusing on revenue growth and process optimization. So I really think you're going to share a lot of interesting insights for everyone on the call today about kind of managing and building budgets effectively and how to forecast spend and software spend. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you here today. And I also want to introduce you to Huli. She's my co-host. Huli's one of our amazing customer success managers here at Cledara. How are you today, Huli?
Doing amazing, Katie. Excited to get started.
Yep, me too. I promise we will get started shortly. Let me just cover a couple of very quick housekeeping points. The session is being recorded and we will send it out afterwards. We have 30 minutes scheduled, and in just a moment, I'm going to hand this over to Huli, who'll be chatting to Sophie about budgeting. And then we want to show you 3 key features in Cledara that will support that budgeting process. And finally, we really want to leave time for your questions. So you'll notice there's a Q&A section here in Zoom. Usually it's down the bottom of the screen. So please submit your questions. Please leave your name and email address, just in case we don't have time to cover all the questions. It means we can get back to you via email afterwards. Perfect. So that's it from me. I'll hand it over to Huli and Sophie.
Thank you, Katie. Sophie, welcome again, and thank you for joining us here on this exciting topic. So let's start with the first question. What are the key strategies and steps when building budgets?
Yeah, of course. So I've got some slides to share, which hopefully have popped up now, that we can run through to kind of structure through this. So yeah, building a budget. Now, key part of this question is like about the strategy for it. And I think it's important to start with thinking, why are we doing a budget? You know, making sure that as the finance function and then expanding that out to the wider business really understands why you're doing this. What's the purpose of this exercise? It's not just a thing you have to do once a year or 4 times a year if you're reforecasting. It's not just a tick box. It should serve value to the business. And I think I believe that finance have a big role to play in explaining the value of the exercise to the business in the first place, and getting everyone on board with why we're doing this. So the budget is there as a reference of your intention of where you're going to get to in often in a year's time. And it acts as a good reference point each month for your reporting to report against and be able to track to. You will reforecast, especially if you're a small or fast-growing business, things are going to change. But to have that reference point and something to continually be reporting against is important. And it's important that everyone understands that it's like a reflection of the business plan. It's not a set of unachievable targets. You know, you may have targets for different functions, but this is a translation of the business plan. Which brings me on to the second point. You need to know your business plan. So as a finance function, part of your role is to understand the overall goals, milestones of the business, and big part of our job is actually translation. We're translating those plans into numbers, into the budget format. And then when we report, we're translating the numbers back out into a commentary, into the story of how that's happened. So you've got to know your business plan to inform your actions, including preparing the budget. The third part, a third sort of bullet point on here about assumptions. Now, when you're building a budget, and I think we'll come on to this in a later question, but you're essentially got a model that is generating outputs based on inputs. So when you're putting a number in for those inputs, you're kind of basing it on an assumption. And so you need to have backed up that assumption. Maybe you can back it up using historical data. Maybe you back it up by reforecasting it regularly and keeping it up to date. And perhaps there's an external market reference you use for that assumption. But being able to back them up and support it is a key strategy here. Saying that, the fourth one is equally as important, and keeping it simple. It's very easy, especially if you're using a spreadsheet, various spreadsheet tools. But if you're using a spreadsheet, they're so flexible and they allow you to input pretty much whatever you want, that it can quickly become complicated. So really thinking about the structure, thinking about which are your crucial inputs, what are your crucial outputs, how can you summarize the outputs into summary tables, and keeping the structure as simple as possible to eliminate errors. There are obviously tools as well as spreadsheets that will help you to eliminate errors. But again, it's all about thinking through the structure of the inputs and the design of the outputs to keep it simple and usable. Because really, you want the whole business to be using this, definitely the exec, definitely the function leads for their budget areas. So it needs to be accessible. And the last point here was about kind of just recognizing that you will need to iterate. It won't be right first time. So you'll need to go and consult with the various relevant stakeholders. So the exec, the function budget holders, different people who are inputting to the assumptions that are underpinning it. So you're going to consult, bring in, change the assumptions, look at the outputs, see whether it's kind of got the right shape you want with the exec, go back, tweak things, etc. So the iterative cycle. Those are kind of the top 5 strategies.
Amazing, Sophie. And how should we specifically approach budgeting for software?
Oh, sorry, is this the business, so the structure of the budget?
Exactly.
So I'll begin by setting out like overall visual kind of how we go about pulling a budget together. So as I talked about above, you've got to know your business plan, and this is going to inform the budget. It's going to inform the goals and the milestones, that's all the timings that go alongside it. You obviously need to define a time period of the budget. And this kind of is your like house for the budget. It's like the roof and the structure of it. So this is the bounds that you're working within. You're working within the bound of the business plan and the bounds of the time period of the particular budget you're working on. Then within that, you've got to start thinking about the inputs and the levers and the drivers that you want to be controlling. So the key drivers around both revenue and costs. The big part of the model that you're going to use to generate this budget is your revenue model. So every business will have a different revenue model. It'll be sector specific, geography specific, product specific. But whatever your revenue model is, what are the drivers of your revenue? You need to understand those and build that out. The next key part is the cost side. So split that between operating costs and any capital or working capital, particularly if you're an inventory-based business or something with big cash flow movements happening. So you've got your revenue and your costs side by side, gives you your P&L essentially, and then you have your cash flow movements, which would be different to the P&L, but the cash flow is a different part of the sort of output of the budget. So that's the kind of architecture that we're working to. And I think it's helpful to just kind of have that simplistic architecture in mind, especially the bounds of the business plan and the timeline, and to kind of keep with that motto of keep it simple. So then pulling that to how you'd approach budgeting for software. Software is obviously a spend item, it's a cost item in that previous diagram. So the first point I've put on here is thinking about it from a bottom-up perspective. Like, first of all, know what you have, and then audit what you actually need. So go through, I think going to talk about this a bit more specifically later and how to review your software spend, but know what you need to spend on software, and accept that it will probably be a pretty large portion of your spend. You know, we live in a very digital world, especially if you're like selling a technology, a SaaS business, professional services business. You're going to be using tech and software a lot in all of your functions. Engineering function will have tech they're using. Customer service will mainly be through online ticket-based softwares. You may have a services business that takes bookings. If you're a SaaS business, you're going to be relying on like billing and payment processing software. It's all across the business, right? It's going to be a large portion of spend. So in our budget, it's pretty much the second biggest spend after salaries. And I think that's pretty common in a SaaS business. Look at it on a per head basis. So if you're trying to assess, like, is this reasonable? Is this too high, too low? Then look at it on a per head basis. So of the people you have in the business, how much additional to their salary are you spending on software per head? And think about whether that's proportional for your type of business and what you're doing. The fourth one is to really actually speak to business partners. So by business partners, if you're in a small business, basically the head of every function, and really understand their functional needs for for their function. Like, what do they need to do and what's the best way for them to do it? Is software the best answer? If so, help them discover which software and how many, like the best pricing package that they can get for that software. And then the key to kind of budgeting out, forecasting forwards, is understanding what drives the cost to change. So as we all know, software has different pricing mechanisms. Some's usage-based, some's user-based, etc. There's lots of different ways. You need to understand whether it's a fixed cost or a cost per user or usage-based, and build that into how you're budgeting for it as your business grows and changes.
And Sophie, do you have any tips for ensuring the budgeting process runs smoothly and well coordinated across departments?
Yeah, so kind of bringing it back out of software to the overall process and thinking about this as a value-added like business exercise. You need the right people engaged at the right times. So, you know, it's just heading into October now, Q4, right? So we are just starting our 2025 budget process. We've just started this afternoon, sitting down with the exec and coming up with a timeline. So especially in a small business with a small team, just getting together and getting, you know, like a project management style, just setting out your timeline from the top. As well as that, setting the expectations, like when do I need input from sales? When do I need input from marketing? When do we need the exec to set the overall bounds and goals, etc.? If there's any new managers or new budget holders in your team, then consider running a like Finance 101 budget session for them. And now's a good time of year to do that before you kind of go full into the budgeting exercise. So talk them through, you know, why as our business, why do we produce the budget? What does the budget mean? Which bits of the budget are you accountable for? What am I going to need from you in terms of input to this cycle, etc.? Which leads into leave more than enough time, right? So especially if you've got new people or it's a new process for your business or you're changing the process from last year, just make sure you plan in enough time. And the last piece is, again, kind of a project management thing rather than finance specific, but proactively communicate the progress and the next steps so everyone knows what's expected of them. And like, you're not being held up in getting the numbers into the budget because you're waiting on some input from elsewhere. So keep communicating progress and what's required.
Great, Sophie, thank you. And I think this question is targeted for everybody. So what do investors look for while doing your budget?
Yeah, so if you're in about to go into an investment round or planning for one, I'd think about this in kind of two parts. So first of all, you need to build the model, like build the architecture, build the inputs, the assumptions, the outputs, like the thing that's going to produce your budget for you. This is the structure that ultimately the numbers fall out of, right? And the investors are going to want to look at that. They're going to want to see evidenced assumptions, clear logic, clear formatting, simple structure and formatting. Like they need to understand it on pretty much first glance. And one really important part here is that the CEO is able to explain the model. So you don't want it so complicated that only finance can explain this thing. The CEO needs to be able to explain it and talk through the numbers. So they need to have had input on generating it to be able to do that. The second half is then the budget. So once you've put your numbers in and you said, this is our budget, this is our plan for this period of time, what investors will be looking for then is that you are consistent. So you are performing to plan, you are performing consistently, and that you have up-to-date reporting versus that plan that you can share with investors on a timely basis at the end of each month and each reporting quarter.
Okay, so the last question, I promise. How do you run regular reviews of software costs and forecasting?
Yeah, so going back to specifically to software costs, yeah, I'd pick a cadence to run them regularly. So we run them quarterly at CharlieHR in line with our like general reforecasting cadence. And just make it part of the regular process in the business so everyone gets used to it. The second point I put here is actually consider if you have the capacity to delegate it out of finance. So our ops team manage these reviews. They go in, so we use Cledara at CharlieHR. They'll go into Cledara and they'll do this review process that I've set out. So they'll export the software spend for the previous quarter, and they'll export it by budget holder. So they can quite easily then share with each budget holder, this is your spend for the last quarter. And then they'll arrange a meeting with each budget holder to, like we talked about, understand what the tool is being used for, if they're still using it or if they'd forgotten that they were still signed up, how many users they've got, are the number of users still up to date, etc. And then do a sense check for any duplication. So often happens that two teams will have signed up for a Zoom account. So checking for general duplication like that. And also sense check for consistency, like is one team really splashing out on software and is one team kind of holding back? And actually, can you redistribute the budget a bit more and kind of encourage the other team to use software for efficiency purposes or to achieve more value, growing like growth activity? And is there a team that actually needs to rein it in a bit and reconsider their usage? There's a few sense checks to do there.
That's very interesting what you mentioned, Sophie, and I'm sure that everyone here is grateful for sharing your experience and observations with us. Actually, when you talk about sense check for duplication, that sounds like our insights feature, which I'm sure Katie will be happy to show you. So I'll hand it over to her so she can show you some features that will help you with your budgeting process. Katie, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much. And Sophie, Julie, that was really interesting. I think we've got some good questions rolling in already. Just a reminder to everyone, we will have a Q&A in about 5 or 6 minutes. So please drop your questions in there for Sophie. Leave your name and email address so we can get back to you if we don't have time today. And yes, Julie, I definitely will make sure I show everybody that feature. So I'll tell you what, I've got 3 features that I'd love to show you right now to help with that budgeting process. I'll just check everyone can see my screen. Perfect. Okay. So I really loved something you said, Sophie, about knowing what you have and auditing also that process. So I think what I'm going to show you today is really going to kind of speak to that. So we start with that kind of knowing what you have. Well, of course, Cledara is the single source of truth for software. The whole company can access Cledara and use this as your software directory. As you can see here very clearly, you have all your software, the team it sits with, and the owners here. And our most successful customers actually have Cledara embedded in their procurement process so that everyone's on the same page. And again, this becomes the single source of truth. So once you know all your software, there's that listing out of the costs and understanding how much you're paying for the software. And for that, we're going to come to the reports section. So we're going to come to reports. I'm actually going to scroll down and go straight to this report here, spend by team. So here we can see the spend per team per month over the last year. And not only that, we can drill down into the spend per software per month. Of course, we've got the total here, so you know exactly what they've spent over the last 12 months and an average as well. And this data can be exported as well. So as Sophie said, to share out with the teams. While we're here, if I stay here a moment, I think this is really interesting to highlight as well. You can see where there's increases in costs, right? So if we look at customer success, we can see, wow, our cost has been steadily growing month on month since the beginning of the year. And we can really even drill down and see that's being driven by Pipedrive and by Zendesk. So potentially this is a seat-based plan that the team's growing, we're adding to, but it's another kind of data point to have when you go into those conversations with those budget holders, with your department heads. Fantastic. Okay, so when it comes to that kind of audit piece and thinking about, auditing what you need, when it comes to auditing software, the most common question we hear from our customers is like, who's using this tool? Are there any opportunities to offboard software that's not getting used? Is there any opportunity to reduce software where we've got too many seats and we don't need them? And we can do that through Engage. So if we come to the Engage section here, this is going to tell us who is accessing a tool. So let's have a look at AirMeet, one of the tools in the success stack. What this is telling us here is, okay, out of the 18 people who have accessed AirMeet, only 9 of them have logged in the last 30 days, so about 50%. So this is great, another data point to talk to the budget owner about whether we really need those 18 seats. Can we reduce it down to 9? If you're interested in how we build up this data, this comes from our Cledara Engage extension. Now that's available on Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Edge, anything Chromium based. And you'll kind of just see it up on my extensions bar there. And essentially this is checking kind of URLs or websites visited against our database of software, which I think is topping out about 8,000 providers at the moment. So there's a lot of software out there. So where it finds a match, so where it sees that this person has accessed software, it's going to send the data about the person, the software, and a time and date stamp. This is how we build up this information for you. So once you've kind of got this information from reports about how much you're spending, information here about the usage, another common question we get is, okay, so how does what I'm spending stack up against others? Am I spending the right amount? And for that, we can come and look at our benchmarks feature. So if I drill in here, benchmarks really will show you how your cost compares against customers of a similar size. So what we can see here is that actually, according to our data, we're overpaying slightly for this tool for the size of company that we are. So this is another data point to go into those conversations with. And this is great for any renewal in general, right? You can actually take this away. And we have one customer who recently told us that they saved 17% on their Adobe subscription thanks to this feature and running this process. Now, I actually want to kind of finally, before I go into insights, which I promise I will show you in just a moment, I actually want to speak to something, Sophie, you said about kind of delegating out of finance. And I know that finance wants to have oversight, but not necessarily take on all the tasks. And I think you might have mentioned this, the people who know the software best are the people who've bought it and who use it day to day. So in Cledara, you can allow those department heads, we call them team managers, to come in. They can get access to this screen here, and they'll be able to see their team stack, their costs over time, and really importantly, when you've done that budget, if you have that budget per team, you can actually add it in here, and then they can see exactly how they're tracking against their budget. And it helps them be more aware and more part of this process if they can really see the impact of their costs and assess bringing new stuff on, whether they need to kind of have a chat to finance about getting any more budget if they're running over, things like that. So it's really enabling those conversations and bringing those people into this budgeting discussion. And finally, I promised to show you insights. So yeah, to pick up on those duplicates. So if I come here and, oops, this one here. Insights is essentially going to sort through your data in Cledara and surface to you where you need to put your attention. So you can see we're surfacing duplicates. So you can see very quickly if two teams have bought the same thing. But not only that, apps that are in like a similar category. So as we were saying before, finances doesn't know everything about software. So you might not know that these two tools are actually very similar. And actually you might want to talk to Chevy and Gerard about whether there's some opportunity to migrate to one tool, save some costs. And what you also see here, Insights is also going to surface to you those drops in utilization, that software usage through Engage that we saw. And it's also going to surface any spend changes. So if anything's going up, you'll get alerted to it here. And this will pop up and refresh at the beginning of every month. So I'll stop there because I know we've got some questions to get to. So I will hand back to you, Huli, and dive in.
Thank you, Katie.
You're welcome.
That was an amazing demo, as always. We have a couple of questions, but I like this one from Pablo. It's actually for Sophie. You're very popular today, Sophie. What recommendation would you give to a fractional CFO who needs to implement Cledara in a company? Any key steps? Sophie would like to help us with this answer.
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty valuable tool for a fractional CFO because a fractional CFO wants to try and save as much of their time for the value-added insights and strategy that they can bring to the business. And taking this operational spend management out of their kind of workload is key. And it probably comes mainly to the point about delegating. So find a person or a function like ops within the team that can actually manage Cledara and set up processes and education to allow them to do that.
Amazing. Katie, will you help me wrap up?
Yeah, sure, of course. We have time, probably just one more question here. And it's just a quick question, I think, just about kind of, those features that I showed there. Somebody's asked us, is that benchmarks feature available as an add-on? So if you go to our pricing page, the person didn't leave their name, so you can head to our pricing page and you can see you can purchase that as an add-on as part of the spend optimization module. And actually we can drop a link to that in the chat in just a moment. But yes, I just wanted to squeeze that last question in there. There are a couple more there, so we will get back to you individually if we didn't get time for your question today. So all that's left for me to say is thank you so much to Sophie for your time today. Sophie, if people want to get hold of you or want to contact you, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn is best, Sophie Conaghan, or Finance for Founders page. My website, financeforfounders.net. But ping me a message on LinkedIn and we can have a call. I have like an open calendar Friday Calendly link as well. So hopefully get to chat to some of you soon and have a great evening, everyone.
Yeah, I've dropped both of those in there as well. And I'll drop one final one. Our marketing team has a fantastic reporting guide to support this webinar. So I've linked that as well. So you can go there and read a bit more about budgeting as well. So well, I'll wrap up there. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. Oh, last one. If you do want any questions for me or for Huli, you can get us on success@cledara.com. More than happy to set up time to share any more features with you. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the afternoon. Have a great rest of the afternoon, Sophie and Huli.
Thank you, Katie.
Bye.
Bye.